Hey, good morning, all. Josh's Severe Weather. Happy Monday to you. Hope you guys are enjoying your month of November so far. A very active weather pattern starting up here for the southern United States, perhaps a precursor of what we're going to see all winter long in El Nino, strong El Nino pattern. But this is a kind of a blessing in disguise right now. We need the rainfall down south. It's going to be quite a bit. So we're not looking at beautiful weather at all over the next several days, but the rain very much needed after a very hot, dry summer and first half of fall. So we're going to talk about that, the weather impacts to places like Florida, which also needs some rainfall, though a lot is coming. And we're also going to talk about potentially a tropical system in the Caribbean we have to keep an eyes on here later this week into the weekend. So let me share my screen and show you the very stormy pattern we're talking about here. And while things are pretty quiet across the northern United States, not so much here in the southeast. We've got low pressure forming in the western Gulf. That is going to bring copious amounts of moisture through the northern Gulf states into Florida here the next couple of days. And then we're going to have to keep an eye over the weekend on the potential track of this low pressure. Not going to be anything tropical, but certainly could be a player in our weather up the East Coast, especially into Atlantic Canada and New England here as we get early in the next week. On the flip side, we do have a potential depression or even low-end tropical storm that could form in the southwestern Caribbean come Thursday and Friday. The next name on the list is Vince. We've had a couple of potential candidates for Vince. We haven't filled the spot yet. This one could fill that slot, or it could very much stay a tropical depression or even just a tropical low at this point. But I think there's a pretty good chance here that it becomes our next named storm. And the general track takes it up through Jamaica, eastern Cuba, Haiti, Dominican Republic, the Southeast Bahamas, Turks and Caicos, and eventually close to or just east of Bermuda. But there's some uncertainty in the future of this potential system here as we get later on into this weekend and early next week. Right now, the National Hurricane Center giving it a 60% chance of becoming a named system here over the next 7 days, or at least a tropical depression, maybe not necessarily a tropical storm. Not expected to develop between now and early in the day on Wednesday, but by the time we get to maybe Thursday, Friday, and early on Saturday, potentially our next tropical depression, number 22, and then the next name on the list would be Vince. I don't think this is going to be a hurricane, but there's certainly going to be still some uncertainty until it does in fact form here in the Southwest Caribbean. We have not seen development over the last few weeks in the Southwest Caribbean or anywhere in the Caribbean as wind shear has been too strong. That is expected to relax here in the next few days, giving us a better shot at seeing some development. A look at the world, and we see there is a storm Debbie here that is heading towards Northern Ireland and northwest Scotland. That's going to bring wind gusts over 70 to 80 miles per hour on coastal sections here in the next 24 hours. So our third big storm of the season here in Europe. And then most of the rest of the action is actually out in the Western Pacific and even the Southwest Pacific, where we do have Category 1 Cyclone Mal, which is heading towards the western part of Fiji and then heading southeast. Also, we've got a depression, which could become a storm threatening the Philippines. And we do have a couple of other areas to keep an eye on here in the West Central Pacific, as well as now in the Bay of Bengal, west of Thailand and the Gulf of Thailand. That may threaten eastern India, Nagaland, as well as Bangladesh here in the coming days. I'll talk real quick about that, but let's focus right now on the Atlantic. And you can see really two areas of great concern for development. I say great concern, areas that I'm watching more closely than what you would normally see. One is this area of thunderstorm activity, which is beginning to flare up more here in the southwestern Caribbean and kind of interacting with a trough here over the northwest Caribbean. And then the other is this upper level low that's forming here in northern Mexico, expected to track in this general direction, sending a ton of moisture along to the eastern part of that track, right along the northern Gulf Coast across Florida here later this week and then out to sea. And the big question mark is, does it continue this way and merge with this system? Do they both merge in here near Bermuda? Or does this break free and come up the East Coast? And right now, there's still too much uncertainty on if that's going to happen. So that's what we're going to keep an eye on here in the coming days. I'm going to have daily videos right through Friday talking about the future of all this moisture and who's going to get what as we start to get more certainty. Here's a look at the water vapor image. And again, you can see very well defined our two features here. Let me get my pen back out. I apologize. I know my cursor is too small, and I am going to get that fixed one of these days. But here we have our upper level low spinning over northeast Mexico and southwestern Texas. Here we have our subtropical jet, which is coming around the southeast side of that upper low, bringing heavy rainfall into the northwestern Gulf and immediate coastal areas of southeast Texas and southwest Louisiana. And as we get into the rest of the week, this upper low is going to track in this direction. And there's some models that even take it down this way. And the upper low actually dives a little bit more southeast, which would keep that moisture away from the Carolinas, Virginia, and the mid-Atlantic, and instead bring the heaviest rains to parts of Florida, South Georgia, and southern Alabama. So we're going to have to track where this upper level low eventually goes, but we're seeing a little bit more of a trend more to the south, but then a bend up the East Coast or out to sea. This is Bermuda right here. So a good chance that Bermuda gets not one, but two systems here over the weekend and early next week. Not that we need any more rain in Bermuda. It's been a very active season here in Bermuda. Here's our trough over the Western Caribbean right now, not developing into anything, but as this upper low moves into the Gulf, what it's going to do is it may ventilate this system, provide it some dynamics to start growing on this side and give it an envelope to develop here in the next couple of days. Apologize, my drawing is not very good. My 5-year-old daughter needs to come over here and draw. She's quite an artist. Here is the infrared here. Looking closer, you can see our two areas to watch. Northwestern Caribbean, seeing most of the action in the Gulf of Honduras, but we don't really have any kind of broad circulation yet in the Southwest Caribbean, northeast of Costa Rica, but that is expected as we get to about Wednesday night and Thursday that we will eventually see some form of spin up here across this area. And models are indicating that that's going to happen somewhere in here. This is Costa Rica. This is Panama. Somewhere northeast of the coast, we're going to see some form of circulation center here. And that eventually is going to get picked up, scooped to the north and east here towards the weekend as this trough dives south through the Gulf of Mexico. Quite a bit of action off of the Texas coast right now. Most of that rain remaining offshore, but things are going to get unsettled as we get into the next couple of days here across the northern Gulf states. Here's the water vapor, just showing you guys what all is going on at the time. And big area of high pressure dominating the greater Antilles, but that is going to eventually move away next week and allow an opening. Now, the European ensembles are getting us some mixed signals on how this development is going to play out. This is last night's, or I guess yesterday afternoon's model run, and you can see the red indicating a 90% chance or greater that we have a tropical depression by Friday morning. And then, of course, those chances climb as we go right through the middle of the Caribbean into the southwestern Atlantic. Now, the latest run from 0Z, this was while you were probably sleeping, shows those chances have dropped to about half of what they were showing. Not a very encouraging trend if you want to see another named storm, and not one if you're a forecaster that's been tracking this for a while. But we're going to keep an eye on it because it still could develop. There's still a 50% chance we get a depression in here. Now, the tropical storm intensity is much lower. The possibility of that happening would be closer to Bermuda over here by Sunday night into early Monday, and that chance is only about 30%. So there's probably a 20 to 30% chance we see a tropical storm watch or warning for the island of Bermuda itself. And right now, most of the greater chances are just to the south and east of Bermuda. Let me circle that so you all can see it. This is Bermuda right here. And you can see the better chances are actually off to the east. And looking at tropical features, typically their strongest winds are on the east and northeast side. So if the storm goes in this direction, the worst of it's going to avoid Bermuda, if that ends up being the case. And then behind this, we are going to keep an eye on the rest of the southwestern Caribbean as we still have somewhat of an envelope for some tropical development. Now, here's a look at the ensembles. You can see pretty clearly this will not be a U.S. storm. It's going to go right through Cuba, Haiti, eastern Jamaica, and then right on up to near and just east of Bermuda. There's nothing showing it coming up the east coast, as our next feature in the Western Gulf is going to be the feature that kind of pushes things out to sea. And you can see that here. We're not looking at a hurricane, probably a tropical storm at worst. And then interestingly, another feature that could come up the East Coast, but this will not be a tropical feature, could produce some strong winds, though, by the time we get into Saturday night and Sunday. But not a lot of certainty on it either, so not something I'm going to forecast yet. Here's the GFS ensemble, and this is a different view for you guys from weatherbell.com. And you can see our strongest intensity here Thursday afternoon is 999 millibars. That's a lower end tropical storm. Now, as we get into Thursday night and Friday, there is some deepening expected from this particular model. And we do see maybe potentially a coastal low forming here off the east coast of either Florida, South Carolina, or North Carolina by Friday afternoon, but that's heading away. So if you take all the ensembles, the strongest solutions go over the central and eastern Bahamas and then up towards Bermuda. from our tropical system, but there are some that keep lower pressures back into the Caribbean and kind of miss the boat on this, and it maybe potentially gets stuck down in here. So a lot of uncertainty when you go off past about 6 to 7 days, as you might expect this time of the year. Worst case scenario, the GFS actually takes the strongest low pressure feature right over Bermuda and potentially a hurricane at that point. So that's just one ensemble member. That's not all of them. That's just one of them at this point. Here's a look at the operational GFS. You can see lowering pressure here by Thursday morning. Here's actually the three features we're tracking. Feature one here in the northwestern Gulf will be coming close to Plaquemines Parish in Louisiana here on Tuesday afternoon. We don't even have anything yet in the Caribbean by Tuesday afternoon. Now, as we go off into time, this is Wednesday afternoon, we start to see some lowering pressure here. Let me circle these for you guys to track at home. And you can see non-tropical low here just southeast of the mouth of the Mississippi River, and then low pressure forming here east of Honduras. Now, as we take this further into time, as we get into Thursday night and Friday, what happens is we do have deepening pressure, but a lot of that's due to the interaction with this Gulf feature. And in fact, the GFS says that the original low pressure here in the Gulf is going to kind of trade off and form over the Gulf Stream into a stronger low, and that's going to head up to the north and east and induce this feature to come up this way as well. So it's going to change the steering patterns, break up our high pressure ridge, and allow things to move off more to the north and east. Let me clear that off for you guys here. Sorry about that. Oops. Still learning this here. All right, we're going to go ahead and erase it. There we go. Now, as we head on into the weekend, we do have low pressure coming up the East Coast. And then we've got our feature here, probably Vince at this point, moving near Cuba and Haiti, producing very heavy rain with it. And then as we get later into the weekend, that first system is zipping up the coast here. And this is a deepening low pressure system, kind of latching onto a front and maybe even losing tropical characteristics by Sunday morning, but coming close to Bermuda at that point. So that's what we're going to watch here. Taking a look at the Northwest Atlantic, I will show you guys what is expected here off the East Coast. Low pressure forming over the Gulf Stream. This is Friday, and then tracking kind of parallel to the coast and maybe coming up towards the Gulf of Maine and Nova Scotia here on Saturday. That is the 6Z run. The 0Z run, on the other hand, is not as strong. It does have low pressure forming and moving up. It's actually stronger here with this tropical feature coming up through Bermuda, but both of them are heading away and could clip the East Coast, could clip portions of Maine and certainly the Atlantic provinces of Canada here as we get through the weekend. So hate to say it, folks, but New England and Atlantic Canada are again looking at a wet weekend next weekend, much like we saw for the majority of the second half of summer and early portion of fall. Here's the European model, and it is showing lower pressure here over the northeastern Gulf. It is not showing quick development off the east coast of Florida, though, or off the Caribbean. So it's slower in development here. Eventually, it does show something forming east of, say, Palm Beach by Friday morning. And it does have maybe a depression southwest of Jamaica on Friday morning. As we get to the weekend, you can see it, the European is not as gung-ho on this, developing into a strong non-tropical low heading up the East Coast, but it is having lower pressure here. And it's also taking probably a tropical storm Vince up through Haiti and then moving it away farther to the south and east of Bermuda as a tropical storm. So the GFS is more aggressive, but the European is trending towards the GFS overall. So we're seeing a little bit more agreement than we had about 3 or 4 days ago. The other big story is going to be the rain here. And over the next 5 days, we're going to see extreme amounts of rainfall, as much as 10 inches above the average for a 5-day stretch, both on the South Coast or the Gulf Coast oil rigs area off of Louisiana, as well as near the northwest Bahamas, as well as over the south central and southwestern Caribbean, and very wet over South Haiti. This could produce some extreme flooding here over the weekend. Same for eastern Jamaica and southeastern Cuba. And then everything pulls away here by the middle part of next week, and we see a drier pattern next week. Not a dry pattern, but a drier pattern here for those who may be going on a cruise for Thanksgiving around the Caymans in Central America. Certainly it does look better after about 6 to 7 days. Here's a look at the GFS, and you can see the wetness as well, kind of in the same areas, generally streaking through Bermuda. And then things are going to be drier after we get this moisture out of here by the second part of next week. Now, we do have some systems in the Pacific. Tropical Cyclone 2 here. That is taking aim here at the western portion of Fiji. Winds are about 50 to 60 miles per hour, and it could get up to typhoon strength here as it passes near or just west of Fiji. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it, but things are active. And then we've got two features here in the Pacific, one a depression, one just a disturbance. This is the first one here, passing over the Philippine Sea, may come close to the Philippines here in about 6 or 7 days. And then we're going to keep an eye on this next system behind it. The GFS gets very aggressive on development here. We don't necessarily believe all of that, but something that we're going to watch. The European ensembles show something that may come through the middle of the Philippines and then into the South China Sea and may develop at that point, maybe threatening Vietnam or even Hong Kong, or maybe falling apart, maybe even recurving here to the east. So a lot of uncertainty on that. And you can see the operational GFS doesn't really strengthen the system of the Philippines, but it's a slow mover and bringing heavy rain Friday into Saturday before moving into the South China Sea and near the Gulf of Vietnam. The next feature, it actually goes over just southwest of Guam here over the weekend and develops it into a typhoon and then a potentially strong typhoon, stalling, and then eventually maybe turning north and east, maybe not. Not sure yet where that's going to end up going. The model run before it was stronger and then weaken the system as wind shear kicks in here, not next week, but the following week. Lots of rain coming, though, in the next 2 weeks across the South China Sea, across the Philippines, flooding as possible, across the Mariana and Marshall Islands, and fortunately, probably quiet in China, South Korea, and mostly Japan. Here's a look also at a potential feature that could form here in the Bay of Bengal, east of India. You can see it forming here Wednesday into Thursday, and a weak system, but one that'll bring a lot of rain up into Bangladesh and eastern India and maybe western Myanmar, and then possibly another system forming behind it. So very wet times ahead here over the Bay of Bengal, affecting parts of South Asia. You can see those rain totals are going to be well above average in the next 5 days. Let's look at the U.S. And most of our weather is going to be on the Gulf Coast. We are going to see moisture pushing into Northern California Wednesday night, Thursday, and then down into Southern California over the weekend. This is part of a big system that's produced some tremendous amounts of snow in the Anchorage, Alaska area. Some parts of inland Western Alaska picking up 5 to 7 feet of snow here in the past couple of days, which is pretty crazy. But that is not uncommon for November to see in Alaska. But you can see most of our wetness is going to be over the southeast, especially over Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama, where this rain is going to be a blessing, and also near the Bahamas and across the east coast of Florida. And the west coast is going to get wet as well here over the second part of this week. Here's a look at total precipitation. We can see Dallas not going to get much. Austin may get a little bit, more so when we get down to the coastal bend and especially over the south central U.S. Here's a look at the operational GFS, and you can see our low pressure tracking slowly over the northern Gulf. It looks like the heaviest rain is going to fall overnight and into tomorrow around and south and east of New Orleans, and then heading into tomorrow night and Wednesday over the Florida Panhandle. The east coast of Florida could be pretty wet as well over the next 3 days. And then our low pressure system here on the GFS is going to try to track up the coast as a front pushes south and east and cools things down here in the Great Lakes on Friday. As we get to this upcoming weekend, we do see this front kind of enticing this low pressure up the east coast. And let me try to bring up New England for you guys, or the eastern U.S. for you guys to see here. Yep. And this is Saturday morning, and we could have low pressure coming up affecting eastern New England, and it could end in some wet snow over the higher elevations behind it as colder air floods in behind this system. I do want to show you Atlantic Canada. Apologize for this. We will get it. There we go. I guess we'll do the St. Lawrence. And you can take a look here at the GFS showing quite a bit of rain coming through the provinces of the Maritimes here. Saturday morning, then moving up through New Brunswick, PEI, Saturday afternoon, and then heavy snow back over the St. Lawrence, heavy rain impacting portions of Newfoundland here Saturday night primarily as this storm moves through, and then drier weather Sunday night into Monday as it turns colder. Here's a look at the overall jet stream pattern. Here's our upper level heights. You see our upper level feature stuck down around Louisiana tomorrow afternoon, tomorrow night, big trough off the west coast, but big ridge building in this week over the Great Lakes and eastern Canada. Things are going to be pretty progressive in the northern branch. You can see storms are going to move through pretty quickly. We need to watch the southern branch. If these two try to phase together, then we have more storminess on the east coast. Most of our models don't show that happening, but the GFS, of course, does try to make things more interesting here over the weekend. When we get into Thanksgiving week, we see more storminess dropping down on the GFS. And this could make for some very interesting weather around Thanksgiving time across the southern and central U.S. and then after Thanksgiving for the southeast and up the East Coast potentially. But I will say this, our models have not been in great agreement as we get beyond 6 or 7 days. Sometimes they are, but right now we're seeing just a big disconnect from what's going on across Canada and what's going on in the subtropics here. So if you pull up the European model and you take a look at it, you can see things look completely different here. In fact, this is a look at the weekend and next week. You see kind of the trough phase here on Saturday, but take a look at this system next week. It's moving quicker, and this is already Monday. So the GFS is behind the European. This is kicking things out. Then the next trough on Thursday. So if the GFS is right, it's not going to cool down in the southeast for Thanksgiving, but if the Euro is right, it will. So I don't know yet what's actually going to happen. We're just going to have to keep a close eye on things here over the weekend into next week. Here's our wetness over the Gulf. You can see our low pressure system here south of Cameron Parish, Louisiana, southeast of Galveston here tomorrow night. And the heaviest rain is going to be mostly off the coast, according to the NAM model. Here's a look at potential rain totals over the next, say, 6 days. And you can see we do have significant amounts of rain over Florida, especially the East Coast. I know we need it more on the West Coast. We are going to get some rain and probably some storms, but the Big Bend of Florida is going to be wet. Southeast Louisiana is going to be wet, and central Mississippi and Alabama and Georgia are going to see a little bit of rain. Not a lot to bust the drought, but it will help. Every little bit does help. Carolinas, on the other hand, probably will stay dry until Friday night. Here's a look at Texas, and you can see a couple of inches possible in Harris County, 2 inches in Houston proper, 2 to 3 on Galveston Island. Down the bend, 1 to 2 inches of rain is expected. Lesser amounts on the 35 corridor. You get up to Dallas, we're probably not going to see really any rain. Looking at Louisiana, or Louisiana, some of us call it from there, so I'm going to say that. And we see an inch or so on the I-10, I-12 corridor, 2 to 3 inches around Slidell on the east side of New Orleans. And in Terrebonne Parish and Lafourche Parish, 5 to 6 inches of rain, according to the European, as Holma checks in at 5 inches. Southern Mississippi, 2 to 3 as well. So that rain will help out. And then taking a look at Florida, we had some heavier showers on the west coast of Florida over the weekend, which was needed, but not everybody saw those. Overall, we're looking at about an inch or two, heavier amounts over the Everglades, 3 to 4 inches. And on the east coast of Florida, there is a potential for 4 to 5 inches in Palm Beach. Palm Beach County, all the way up to Jupiter and maybe up to Port St. Lucie and just south of Vero Beach, 3 inches in Miami-Dade, 2 inches in Monroe County, 1 to 2 over the Florida Keys. But you can see the Big Bend area could see 3 to 6 inches of rain out of this. So this rain is very much needed. It's not all coming at once, so I don't think flooding is going to be a problem. We could see a few heavier thunderstorms and certainly some gusty winds as well from this low pressure system. You could see those wind gusts off the coast of Louisiana gusting over 40 miles per hour, maybe 50 to 60 on the oil rigs, and that could lead to some shutdown of operations there, which could jack up the gas prices here for Thanksgiving. If you're traveling, keep that in mind. Again, I can't predict what's going to happen with that. That's just something I'm watching. And then you can see those gusty winds remain over the northeastern Gulf here as we head to Wednesday night and Thursday before relaxing. And then all of the nastiness is going to be off the east coast of Florida by Friday. Lightning will be a possibility. I don't think we're looking at widespread severe weather, but we could see a few rougher storms here moving through the Florida peninsula here. You can kind of see the timing on that. Southwest Florida Wednesday morning, southeast Florida Wednesday anytime, and then Southwest Florida could see another wave come through here Wednesday evening, and then that should move out of here by Thursday afternoon. We may see a little bit more around the Bay Area, mainly offshore during the day on Thursday. Wind gusts off the southeast coast and over Cuba, you can see could get up over 50 to 60 miles per hour on Friday. This is not from our tropical feature, but from our subtropical feature that's moving through. And then you can see the stronger winds moving through the Bahamas and south and east of Bermuda over the weekend. And I'll zoom in and show that to you all here. These are knots. Weather Bell doesn't show miles per hour in the Caribbean, but 40 to 60 knots, which would be 50 to 65 or 70 mile per hour gusts possible over the Turks and Caicos, over southwestern Haiti. And most of this is going to come Friday afternoon through early Saturday before this heads away. Bermuda will see some stronger wind gusts potentially as well, 50 to 60 miles per hour over the weekend, the worst of which would probably be on Saturday night before things improve later on Sunday. And finally, I did tease you about temperatures. Here's a look at how warm we're going to be looking across the central and eastern U.S. this week. Cooler than average over South Texas due to that cloud cover, cooler than average in the Pac Northwest, and a little on the cool side in eastern Canada for a few more days before things moderate. But as we get into the weekend, we do see another cool shot coming down for the East Coast, followed by a warm-up coming here next week leading up to Thanksgiving. And the big timing question is how much of this cold air bottled up in Western Canada invades South and East. The European says it's still mild in the Eastern U.S. for Thanksgiving. The GFS and the Canadian push that cold air farther south and east a little bit quicker. So we'll be in transition around Thanksgiving. It's possible it gets cold faster. It's possible it takes a little bit longer. And of course, I don't know the answer to what's actually going to happen because there's too much uncertainty right now in these forecast trends. Thank you all so much for your time today. If you did enjoy this video and you came here for the first time or second time, please consider subscribing, and that helps me grow my reach and reach more folks out there. But I thank you for your time. I give all the glory to God. Jesus is my Savior. I pray that He's yours. He gives me the joy in my life, gives me the push to continue to do this. And for 30 years of my life, I did not give God the glory. I tried to do everything on my own, not with God's help. But thank goodness, over time, I was given that spirit of courage to accept Christ as my Savior. And that's just how I am. That's what I truly believe. I will say 1 Peter, excuse me, 1 Peter 4:11, if any man speak, let him speak as the oracles of God. If any man minister, let him do it as the ability which God giveth, that God in all things may be glorified through Jesus Christ, to whom be praise and dominion forever and ever. Amen. I finally gave my life to Christ when I was 30 years old and gave the dominion back to God. God's always had dominion over us, but in my life, I didn't see that. But my eyes were open to God, and through the glory that's given to us through Jesus Christ, now I've got a certain future of where I'm going eternally. I didn't for a while. I put my worth in my success and what I was doing on my own. And it wasn't extremely successful, to be honest. I was struggling with a lot of things, finances, with my level of how important I saw myself and the worth that I put in myself, my self-worth, my self-consciousness. But for a long time, I was trying to do it all myself. And thank God that changed. And I accepted Christ. And over the last 10 and a half years, I have now given that dominion to God in my life and allowed Him to work through me so that I can do things like this and help you all out. So I would love to pray for you, no matter what situation you're going through. And I will be back in the morning tomorrow with more on these systems. I hope you guys have a wonderful Monday. We'll catch you all then. God bless you.